Peter cruised through the busy city streets in his sleek sports car, his mind drifting after a long business meeting. The weight of loneliness had become his constant companion since the death of his wife and the tragic loss of his son, Albert. As he turned a corner, he swerved to avoid a pothole and nearly struck a woman sitting on the sidewalk with two young girls and a scruffy cat nestled at her feet. There was something about the children that caught his attention, something familiar, almost haunting. Peter's heart raced as he slowly approached them, his gaze fixated on the girls. Their faces bore a resemblance to Albert's, a look that stirred memories he had long buried. Before he could react, the woman, sensing his gaze, quickly stood up, gathered the girls close, and began walking away without a word. Peter felt unsettled, his thoughts tangled in confusion. The resemblance to Albert was undeniable, and the strange sense of recognition gnawed at him. He couldn't simply walk away. Something deep inside told him that there was more to this encounter than mere coincidence. The girls' faces haunted him as he watched them disappear down the street. With a mixture of curiosity and unease, Peter couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to learn more about them. The pull to uncover the truth was overwhelming. He had to find out who they were and why they felt so familiar. Back at his mansion, Peter couldn't focus on the mountain of paperwork on his desk. His mind kept drifting back to the encounter with the woman and the girls. The resemblance to his late son, Albert, was uncanny. He thought of the years he had spent chasing after success, neglecting the family that truly mattered. Albert had been his pride and joy, until the tragic accident that had taken him from this world far too soon. Peter sighed deeply, running a hand through his silver hair. He had always kept to himself after Albert's death, burying his emotions beneath his wealth. But something about those girls stirred something inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. His instincts told him there was more to the story. Unable to shake the feeling, Peter hired a private investigator the following morning. He needed answers. The investigator quickly gathered information about the woman, Anne, and her two daughters. To Peter's shock, the investigator revealed that the girls were his granddaughters, Albert's children, whom he had never known existed. The revelation hit Peter like a bolt of lightning. He sat down heavily in his study chair, his mind racing. How could Albert have kept this from him? Had he even known about them before his death? Peter's thoughts were filled with guilt and regret. He had spent so many years focusing on his career and wealth, never realizing the family he had lost. The investigator's report also revealed that Anne and the girls were struggling. They were living in difficult conditions, barely scraping by. Peter felt a surge of urgency. He had the means to help, but could he bridge the gap between them? Could he redeem himself for all the years of emotional distance he had put between himself and his family? Peter stared out the window, lost in thought. His life was about to change forever. The pull to find and help his granddaughters was too strong to ignore. He knew he had to meet them, to find out who they were, and to see if there was a chance to rebuild the family he had lost. The next day, Peter set out to find Anne and the girls. He couldn't shake the mix of excitement and apprehension that gripped him. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew he had to try. Max, his loyal Labrador, sat beside him in the car, sensing his owner's unease. Peter's mind raced with questions. What would he say? How would Anne react to him after all these years? Peter arrived at a modest apartment complex on the edge of town, far from the luxurious life he had built. He parked his sports car and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He was not just a wealthy man arriving with an offer of help. He was a grandfather, trying to reconnect with family he had never known. The realization struck him deeply. As he approached the door to Anne's apartment, his heart pounded. He knocked gently, his breath held in anticipation. A few moments later, the door creaked open, revealing Anne. She looked tired, her face drawn, but there was a recognition in her eyes as she saw Peter standing before her. Her posture stiffened, and she instinctively stepped back, as if to protect the children. "Peter," she said, her voice cautious. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," Peter said softly. I found out about the girls. They're my granddaughters, aren't they? Anne's eyes widened with a mixture of shock and suspicion. She glanced over her shoulder at the two girls, who were quietly watching from the other room. How did you find out? She asked, her tone sharp. I hired a private investigator, Peter admitted, feeling the weight of his confession. I should have known sooner. I'm sorry for not being there for them, or for you, and remained silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on Peter. Her protective instincts were on high alert, but there was something else, something that Peter couldn't quite place, beneath her guarded exterior. I'm not here to fix everything overnight, Peter said, his voice steady. I want to be part of their lives. If you'll let me, and looked at him, her expression unreadable, before she finally nodded. I don't know if I can trust you, Peter, but for the girl's sake, I'll listen. Peter's heart swelled with hope. This was only the beginning, but it was a step forward. Peter took things slowly, mindful of the fragile trust he was building with Anne and the girls. His initial attempts to offer financial help had been met with hesitation, but he wasn't there just to throw money at their problems. He wanted to show them, through his actions, that he was committed to being a part of their lives. Every day, he made small gestures, bringing simple gifts for the girls, helping and with errands, and spending time with them. Max, his loyal Labrador, played a key role in bridging the gap. The girls, initially shy and reserved, warmed up to the dog quickly, and his presence seemed to make Peter more approachable. The girls began to ask questions about Max, their curiosity helping break down some of the walls between them. Peter took every opportunity to interact with them, whether it was playing a game or simply sitting with them, letting them get to know him at their own pace. As the days passed, Peter saw more of Albert in the girls, the way they smiled, the way they looked at him with cautious curiosity. It was both painful and beautiful. He realized how much he had missed by shutting himself off from the world after Albert's death. The guilt gnawed at him, but he knew he couldn't dwell on it. What mattered now was being present for these girls, his granddaughters, and slowly building a relationship with them. And remained distant, still wary, but Peter could sense a change. She no longer seemed as closed off. When they spoke, she was more willing to listen, even though her emotions were still guarded. It was clear that rebuilding trust would take time. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed and pulled Peter aside, she spoke quietly, as if weighing her words carefully. I can't promise that everything will be okay, Peter, she said, but I'll give you a chance. For the girls' sake. Peter's heart swelled with gratitude. He hadn't expected her to fully trust him, but her words gave him hope. He wasn't going to waste this chance. It was just the beginning, but he knew that with patience, he could prove himself. Peter continued his visits, each one slowly building a bridge between him and the girls. With every shared laugh, every game, the distance between them seemed to shrink. The girls no longer saw him as a stranger or a distant figure of authority. They began to view him as someone they could trust. Max, always by their side, played a crucial role in this transformation. The dog's presence seemed to offer the girls a sense of security they hadn't felt before, a comforting constant in the midst of uncertainty. As Peter spent more time with the girls and watched from the sidelines, still hesitant, though she didn't push him away as forcefully as she had before, her emotional walls remained intact. The pain of her past, the years of being abandoned by Peter and dealing with the loss of Albert, kept her from fully opening up. Her trust in Peter was fragile, and she still wasn't sure if she could forgive him for the years he had missed, the opportunities he hadn't taken to be there for her family. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the girls play in the yard, Peter felt a surge of determination. He knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but he had to try. He turned to Anne, his voice soft but sincere. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quietly. "I'm asking for a chance to be a part of their lives. A real part, not just a donor, not just a visitor who shows up with gifts." Anne's eyes softened, but there was still doubt lingering in them. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "I don't know if I can trust you, Peter," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm willing to let you try." For the girls, Peter felt a surge of relief, though he knew this was only the beginning. He smiled, a small but genuine expression of gratitude. "I'll prove it to you," he said, his voice filled with resolve. It wasn't much, but it was a step forward. A fragile bond had begun to form between them, built on trust, patience, and the hope that the wounds of the past could heal, one small step at a time. Peter knew that there was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. Months passed, and the connection between Peter, Anne, and the girls grew stronger. What had started as tentative steps toward rebuilding a fractured family had blossomed into something real. Peter no longer focused on his wealth. It had become irrelevant. He had begun to realize that no amount of money could replace the love and trust he was building with Anne and the girls. The small moments with them, whether it was a shared laugh or a quiet evening together, meant more than all his financial success ever had. And, though still wary, began to see the change in Peter. She watched him transform, not just through his actions, but through his quiet, unwavering commitment. Every visit, every effort to spend time with the girls, every gesture that went beyond what was expected, these things showed her that he was serious. He wasn't just trying to fix things with grand gestures or money. He was truly invested in being part of their lives. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, the warmth of the family gathered around him was something Peter had never experienced before. He reached across the table and gently took Anne's hand in his. She looked at him in surprise, her eyes meeting his, uncertain of what was to come. Peter's voice was soft but steady. "I'm not asking for a quick fix," he said. "I'm not asking for anything in return, but I want you to know that I'll always be here. I'll never leave you or the girls," and held his gaze for a long moment. Her heart ached with the weight of everything she had been through, all the years of pain and doubt. But in that moment, she realized that Peter's words were not just empty promises. He had shown her, through his actions, that he was there to stay, that he was committed to their future, no matter how difficult or complicated. "I believe you," Anne said quietly, her voice filled with a mix of emotion and cautious hope. Peter smiled, a wave of relief flooding through him. His heart felt lighter, knowing that Anne had finally let down her guard. "I won't let you down. I promise," he said, his voice filled with the sincerity of a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. It was a simple promise, but it was enough. It marked the beginning of something new, a chance for healing, for love, and for the family they could now build together. Peter spent the next few months fully integrating himself into the lives of the girls. He took them on outings, spent quiet afternoons at home, and made sure they had everything they needed. No longer focused on his wealth, Peter devoted himself to being present in their lives, understanding that his time and attention were the most valuable things he could offer. His efforts to connect with the girls went beyond material gifts. He truly wanted to be there for them, to help shape their future. And, though still cautious, began to see a different side of Peter. At first, she had assumed he was simply trying to buy their affection, to compensate for his absence with things that could never replace the time he had missed. But as Peter continued to show up, day after day, and began to see that he wasn't just throwing money at them, he was trying to build a relationship, one that was based on genuine care and presence. One afternoon, as Peter stood in the garden watching the girls play with Max, their laughter filling the air, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The success he had once measured his life by now seemed hollow. His wealth, his career, all of it felt empty without the love and connection of family. As he stood there, he realized that this was what he had been missing all along, a family to call his own, and walked up beside him, her eyes softening as she watched the girls. "You've changed, Peter," she said quietly, her voice filled with the quiet acknowledgement of the progress they had made. Peter turned to her, his expression serious but filled with determination. "I want to be a real part of their lives. I know it won't be easy, but I'm ready to do the work," and smiled, a hint of hope breaking through the years of skepticism. I think we can try." For the first time, Peter felt a true sense of belonging. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. As time passed, the bond between Peter and the girls deepened. Peter, once a man defined by his wealth and success, had transformed. No longer focused on building his empire, he had become a man whose life was defined by his commitment to his family. Anne, who had once been hesitant, now saw in Peter the man she had always hoped he could be, a man willing to show up, to care, and to make amends for the years they had lost. The girls, who had started as strangers in Peter's life, were no longer just children he had discovered. They were now his granddaughters. Their smiles, their laughter, the way they turned to him for comfort and guidance, they had become the most precious part of his life. One evening, Peter sat at the dinner table with Anne and the girls, Max lying at his feet as the family shared a quiet meal together. As he looked around the table, Peter felt a profound sense of peace. In that moment, he realized that he had everything he had ever wanted. He had family, and that was more than enough. If you enjoyed this emotional journey, don't forget to click on the card above to watch more heartwarming stories like this one. Subscribe to our channel for more touching narratives like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. I truly love reading your comments and hearing your thoughts. Your feedback means the world to us.